So about 12 years ago, when I started working with a wireless dealer, we had maybe 3 or 4 stores at the time, and we had a list from the carrier, of course, when we got paid. We had a list that we manually typed into Excel from manually handwritten contracts of everything that we expected, everything we had activated. And the owner's wife and I would sit in the back seat of the car on road trips with our multicolored highlighters and say, "Do you have this number?" And we'd highlight, "Do you have this number?" Highlight different color if it wasn't there. So that was extremely time consuming, extremely painful, made us car sick. So we've come a long ways from then. Hopefully no one's doing that. But we do want to make sure that we can help you reconcile the most efficient and effective way possible using RQ4. So are you reconciling in RQ4? How about a show of hands? Who's reconciling in RQ4? Awesome. That's really awesome. More than I expected. So let's look at a new feature. This is available in version 4.8, so many of you may already have this. Some of you may not. But this is something that we've done specifically to help make the reconciliation more customizable and just more efficient for you. So let's take a closer look at this. So this is our Reconcile Vendor Rebate screen. I know it's probably really hard to see up on the screen. It's a huge screen, a huge window in RQ4. But essentially we have our category that we've chosen to work with. So we always want to split that up into new activations, upgrades, features, subsidies, etc. We have that list on the left of those transactions in RQ4 based on the search criteria that we enter in. So the date range, usually the month, and then of course the category. And then on the right we have the list called the carrier list, or the journal that we've imported in from Excel that came from the carrier or the vendor that's paid us for those items. So this is what the screen looked like in version 4.7 and prior. We had a long list of compare options. A lot of combinations were there, maybe not all the combinations you needed though, but they were pre-built, things like tracking number and amount, tracking number only, serial number, full name and amount, just most of what you would need, but maybe not everything. And then, depending on which one you chose, it would either flag or reconcile, and it would be based on which one you chose, but not necessarily based on what you might think it should do in some cases. So we've changed all of that now. So instead of choosing from a pre-built list, you can make your combinations. So from a list of options, here we have tracking number, serial number, amount, name, SOC code, everything you would expect. And you have 4 drop-downs, and you can build anything you want there. You can use just one, you can use all 4, any combination, and compare what you want to compare. Then next, over there to the right, we have the action. So you can decide, do you want that to reconcile or do you want it to flag? If you choose reconcile, then that means it's a perfect match. If those criteria are met, if RQ4 finds a match, then we want that to reconcile, we want to save, and that will drop off the list. We won't need to look at it anymore. It's perfect. In the case of flagging, for something that's a potential match, maybe the name matches, maybe the mobile number matches, but the amount's different, or you just want to double check that or research it further, then you have the option there to do the flag, and then you can work with it more. So now we're going to dive a little deeper into Reconcile Vendor Rebates and look at another feature that's very powerful in this specific screen, and that's using search filters. So it's available in most RQ4 reports. I'm sure you're familiar with using search filters, but it's often underutilized in this tool specifically when reconciling. So here we have our Reconcile Vendor Rebates screen again. Notice the highlighting there in the upper right-hand corner. There's a magnifying glass on both sides of the list. We'll take a little closer look at that. Hopefully you can see that better. Once we click the magnifying glass, the search filters turn on. So that it gives us a search box at the top of every column that's on both lists that we're working with. And from there, we can filter those items and really get down to the ones that we want to work with. So let's look at some examples of that. First of all, if we've flagged some matches, so maybe we've reconciled everything that can reconcile, but now we have some items where the amounts are different, but the mobile numbers did match. So we can compare by tracking number, find all of those flagged items, and then the first thing we can do there is, on the RQ4 list, filter by the flag column. So we just put a check mark under the flag column, and then we can see everything that matched there. And here's a closer look at that. So then we can take that a step further. Let's say we had several items that matched by tracking number, and then we started looking at those closer. Maybe we sorted by the amount, sorted by the collected, and then we found some items, we found some patterns there where the same thing was happening. So for example, our amount column there that's highlighted, that is the amount that we're expecting from RQ4 based on the setup in RQ4, based on the transaction, how the sales rep rang up that sale in some cases. And then right next to that, we have the collected column. That starts out as 0 when you first populate your list, but if you find matches through the compare option, you have a check mark there next to the reconcile box that says collected, and you can choose to autofill that collected column with the amount that the carrier paid on the right side. So this is huge. This takes it from looking at 2 lists to just needing to look at 1 list, because we have the information side by side of this is what I expected for this transaction and this is what I got paid. So now that we've looked through these, we found some patterns in this scenario, and here's a better look at that. We have in the amount column $165. So we expected $165 based on the sales transaction, but the carrier paid $150. So we're $15 short on all of these, and it happens to be that there's 27 records there. So instead of looking through, maybe 200 matches or something where the amounts are all different, now we've narrowed that down to 27, and we can work with those all together instead of going line by line and trying to figure out with every individual sale what happened, how much is it short. We can just look at this as a group. So in this case, we could scroll over to the right. We could see, are these all new activations? Are these all upgrades? Are they all the same phone if it's an equipment subsidy? Is it all the same rate plan tier or the same specific rate plan? We can really take a closer look at that. Is it all the same store? Maybe all the same salesperson that's ringing up items incorrectly. But we can decide by digging into those items that are all similar and all paid the same, and decide, do we need to research this further? Do we need to dispute it with the carrier because they should have paid the $165? Or maybe we can see right away this was a problem with how they were rang up. The carrier's right, and we need to adjust those. So whichever we decide, we can use the set tool there. If it is something that needs to be disputed, we can just set comments and say dispute or research, something that we can again use the search filters for and find later easily. Or if we decide to go ahead and adjust to match what the carrier paid, we just set the amount, type in 150, and click for all. There's no need to highlight, because since we've used the search filters, the For All button is going to change everything that we are seeing in the filtered view. So kind of as a wrap-up as far as reconciling, keep in mind, specifically with the filters, they can be used on any column. You can use several at a time, whatever makes sense for you. They can be used in the Reconcile Vendor Rebate screen or in the Chargeback screen, as well as most of our reports in RQ4. So don't forget to take advantage of this feature, as well as as reconciling in RQ4. I know some of you maybe haven't been reconciling, and I'm glad to see that most of you in this room are. But if you haven't been, if it's maybe you've tried before and the functionality wasn't quite where you wanted it to be, or maybe you just didn't have the training or the tools you needed, but we've got, as you can see here, some great new features, so give it a try again and see if you can make it work. And keep in mind, of course, with reconciling in general, we want you to be able to use these tools so that you can save yourself time, and ultimately time is money. So let's talk about chargebacks. We all hate chargebacks. They are a necessary evil in the wireless industry. Do you know how much you've been charged back by your carrier and why? So let's look at the typical flow for a sale that charges back. So first the customer comes into your store, buys a phone. So maybe the next month or so you're paid for that commission and whatever goes along with that, features, equipment subsidies, etc. Then, as many of you are, you reconcile that commission in RQ4. And then hopefully it's a very small percentage, but later on, maybe 2 or 3, 4 months later, the customer cancels that line. Then, of course, you get a list of those chargebacks or clawbacks from your carrier. That may be the first that you've heard of that cancellation. And then, hopefully, you're processing that chargeback in RQ4. So are your chargebacks recorded in RQ4? So show of hands, who's recording chargebacks in some way in RQ4? Great, so still quite a few. So we did some research on our client databases. Less than 8% of RQ4 clients have processed at least one full chargeback in the last 6 months. So keep in mind the statistic may be a little bit low because there's a couple other ways that you can process chargebacks too. You can do a refund or a partial chargeback, and some of you may be doing that. But also, I think it's just maybe low because this is a fairly new feature, and a lot of people don't know about the benefits of it and really how it works. So let's look at the process. So a full chargeback, specifically in RQ4, there's several benefits to recording your chargebacks this way versus a refund or a partial chargeback. First is the commission to the sales rep is reversed when you process a chargeback, regardless of whether you're paying a flat spiff amount or whether you're paying a percentage of margin or any kind of percent commission structure, it's automatically reversed. It also reverses your revenue. So that will end up in your general ledger. You'll see that reversal. Also in any reporting in RQ4 that shows profit, that'll be reflected there as well. But it does not change your performance metrics totals. So when you refund a sale, that's going to immediately change your, if it's a new activation SKU that you're working with, that's going to change your current performance metrics totals. So if you're looking at your new activation totals for the month, it's going to negatively affect that, even though the sale was maybe 3 months ago. But with a chargeback, it does not affect this month's sales. But of course, the reporting is there so that you can see those numbers at any time and look at those any way you want to, deduct those from the proper months if you want to. So here we have our reconcile chargeback screen. It looks very similar to the reconcile vendor rebate screen. One main difference is that you're searching for, on the RQ4 side, everything that's been reconciled during the time frame of sales that could be on your chargeback list. So you might be working with a 6-month period of sales. You're only going to see items in here that have been previously reconciled in the reconcile vendor rebate screen. And again, we're comparing to a list from the carrier. This time, it's a shorter list just of chargebacks or clawbacks. They're negative amounts. And RQ4 automatically knows that you're going to have a positive amount on the RQ4 list of reconciled items, a negative amount on the chargeback list, and it accounts for that, even when you match by amount. So here we have our same compare tools again. These are also updated in the reconcile chargeback screen. You can choose any combination there to compare by, anything that fits your needs there with your list from the carrier. And then after we've flagged those possible matches, we can again use our search filters, narrow those down to just the items that matched based on whatever criteria we chose. Then we can highlight all of those, or maybe a portion of those, or individual if we want to. Right-click and select full chargeback. So you don't have to do them one at a time. You can highlight the whole list. Then we have the opportunity to put in comments around why we're charging that back, or maybe why the carrier charged us back for it. Then we also have a list of pre-built reason codes that you can customize in your database. And then this is a report that we have for every full chargeback. It's called the Chargeback Summary Report. The view we're looking at here is the Product Detail tab. I'm not sure if you can see it very well, but there's actually 5 tabs at the top. 4 are summary views based on like location, company, product, employee, and then we have the Product Detail that has just tons of detail, the link to the original invoice, the link to the chargeback document, and all the basic SKU information as well. When you're running this report, you can search by a category in the product tree, by a specific product, or by the journal number. And the journal is just that list of chargebacks or clawbacks that you're importing in. Do you know which of your locations are profitable? So by profitable, I mean not just your profit that's recorded in RQ4, but your P&L statements. Do you have P&L statements by location, income statements? In your accounting software, are you able to produce those numbers and see, including your overhead, including your payroll and everything, which locations are truly profitable, or maybe which ones aren't? Again, back when I was working with a wireless dealer, we had one store in particular, big, beautiful store in a pretty good sized city. We had, pretty good staff there, huge overhead because it was a giant store. And we, one month looking at our financial statements, realized, actually after looking at several months together, realized we were losing an average of $5,000 per month on that one store. So that was, of course, huge. It dipped into the cash flow pretty quickly. And it wouldn't take long for that to cause some serious problems. So we looked at the options for moving it, looked at everything possible. We eventually closed it. But in many cases, maybe there's something that could be done. Maybe it could be moved. Maybe the staff could be changed, different processes put in place. So it's important to know what's going on with each location specifically, not just your overall company. In that scenario, the company was making quite a bit of money, but it was being dragged down by one store in particular. So it's important to know, again, specifically for each location what's going on. So let's look at location code setup in RQ4. Ultimately, this feature alone is going to help you get to that point where you can see information by location. Here we have our GL account activity report. This is our main accounting general ledger report in RQ4. This is also the report that ultimately gets you to the QuickBooks or Great Plains exports. So if you are using one of those exports, you want to make sure that you have this location code set up, because that's what matches up to your class in QuickBooks or your location code in Great Plains. And that's how that software knows when you import that file that that's the location it's working with. Even if you don't use one of those exports, though, it's important, if you have multiple locations, to still set up these location codes. On this report, you'll see there about the first 20 lines are account number 1000, and that's the bank account. So the reason we have that many lines for the same account is because there's a line for each location. And then we can see for each location the debit and credit totals. So we have a way, if we set up the location code, to have an identifier on each one of these rows so we can see which location we're working with. So this is our settings console in our Q4. And we're looking at the company settings over on the left, the general setup, and then that's the location setup there that's highlighted. And this is what our location setup screen looks like. And I know that's probably hard to see, but we're going to zoom in here in a second. But this is just the overall screen. You have the search bar for each location on the left side, so you can toggle between locations. And then this is a closer look at that screen, and we have a tab that's for financial. And that's highlighted here in the middle, and then over on the right we have the code. So in this case we have a code that's -16BB. Your code can be really anything you want it to be. It can be letters, numbers, it can have characters, it can have spaces. Again, keep in mind, if you're using one of those exports, then you want it to match character for character to what you have set up in that accounting software. If you're not using one of those exports, then just choose something that helps you identify that. So whatever your location name is fine. If you have a number scheme, that's fine. You may want to consider, especially if you're not using the export, to put a dash or some kind of separator there at the beginning of this, because this code will immediately follow the account number. So you'll just be able to see some separation there if you add something in before. So this is what our GL account activity report looks like now that we've added that location code. And here's a closer look at that. So you can see there we still have a row for every location, but now we have a different location code after the account number, and we can easily see which location we're working with. So again, ultimately, this is going to give you those financial numbers easily by location, especially if you're exporting that information, so that you can get those into your accounting softwares and ultimately get those financial statements by location. So now we're going to take a deeper look into the GL account activity report and kind of build upon another way to use search filters. Did you know that you can find all the GL implications of a single transaction? So, of course, every transaction in our Q4 that's finance related has an implication on the general ledger. And we have all that detail available in the GL account activity report, and we'll look at that a little bit closer. Really, the benefit to this is you can see exactly what's going on. So every transaction that takes place, you can see in your general ledger what's happening. How is this recording? Is it correct? Is everything set up properly? Is everything calculating properly? And you can see exactly how that affects your general ledger. So I'm from the Show Me state. Stacy didn't mention that, but I'm from Missouri. We're the Show Me state. And I really like to see this kind of thing for myself. So this allows me to do that. So I can look at a specific transaction, can look at specific account activity and see exactly what's going on and just see it for myself. So let's take a look at that. Here we have the GL account activity report again. There, highlighted at the top of the screen, is a button called View Company Detail. Then once we click that, we have a window that comes up here in front that says Company Detail Inquiry. So this is based on whatever search criteria we put in, so maybe we're looking at one location. Usually in this report, we're looking at all of the locations. Maybe we're looking at just one day, could be a week, a month. Whatever you enter here when you're running this report, this will give you every transaction that's affecting your general ledger and all of the detail around that. So here we have, hopefully you can see that, there is the date, the location, the source document with a link to that. So if it's an invoice, you can see the original invoice. If it's a purchase order or a transfer, you can see the backup document for that with exactly what inventory is received or moved around. Bill payment transactions, inventory adjustments, chargebacks, anything that's there, you can see that source document and view that. You also have, of course, the debit and credit, and then the source type. So it tells you clearly if it's an invoice, if it's a bill payment, if it's a purchase order. So now we can turn on our search filters again, just by clicking on the magnifying glass in the upper right-hand corner. So here we have filtered by the Highlands location and account number 4000. So 4000 in this database is our sales revenue. So we can see the debits and credits, the totals there at the bottom for our sales revenue for this day for the Highlands location. So you can see right away there's just tons of combinations you could do here, tons of possibilities to really drill down on what you want to see. So here's where we can actually filter by a specific transaction. So if you have an invoice number and you want to see how did this affect my general ledger, just put in the invoice number right in the filter there. It shows you every debit and credit and what accounts those are hitting. This is an example of a chargeback that we processed earlier. So this is a full chargeback. We have a debit to our carrier commission revenue and a credit to our vendor rebate receivable. So the exact opposite of how that transaction is recorded when it's originally sold. So again, just take advantage of the search filters. Anything that you want to see in the general ledger, just click right on the View Company Detail, use your search filters, sort, and just look for yourself. So now it's time to talk about inventory. Do you know how much money is tied up in your inventory? So when I worked at the wireless dealer, we had a common kind of saying, especially among those of us in the admin office that had to write the checks for the inventory, which was, of course, tons and tons of money. And, you know, we're watching those things. We said our inventory on the shelves were just stacks of $100 bills. So, you know, they move in and out so fast. Nowadays, a piece of equipment oftentimes is $500 or $600 bills, but really that's what it is. It's money sitting on the shelf. So we're going to look at the inventory totals by location report. This is technically an inventory report in RQ4, but it's also often an accountant's favorite report. And it's very simple. It's just going to give you your inventory asset at any time for any location, easy to get to. So this is what our search bar looks like for this report. Again, it's the inventory totals by location report. We can run this by one location or any group of locations, so district, region, entire company. We can also run this by a location type. So we have the option for a location type in RQ4. Often that's used to manage inventory. So you might have an A-type store, a B-type store, a C-type store. Each one you stock different things or maybe different, you know, maybe you want your inventory to be a certain amount or certain range within each type of store. Maybe some are kiosks or maybe it depends on the size of the store, but you can use that to help you manage your inventory. It's available in many of the inventory reports, including this one. Then we have an as-on date. So this is particularly important for this report. So when I was working for the wireless dealer, before we switched to IQmetrix products, with our other point-of-sale provider, we could only run this inventory asset report for right now. So if we wanted to know the inventory at the last day of the month, then someone would have to stay late, wait till every store closed. Usually that was me, and run a report late at night to see what's our inventory right now. Well, with RQ4, you can run that for any time you want. So it can be last week, last month, last year. You choose the date. Then you can also choose the category. So you can look at, of course, all of your products if you want to, or just one location, just one category. Or new in version 4.9, you can choose multiple categories. So if you want to see your accessories and your phones, but not your other products, or if you want to see maybe your iPhones and your smartphones or something, however you have those broken down, you can pick and choose categories. So this is what that report looks like. It's real simple. We have the locations listed out there. We have the in stock, in non-sellable, in transfer, on RMA, on loan statuses broken out, and then we have the total. We also have that location type listed on the far right, so we can use that to group or to filter, just to make the report a little easier to use. So I want my general ledger to reflect why my inventory is being adjusted. Does that sound like a good idea to anyone? So back to inventory being viewed as $100 bills. It's important to know how much you have at any given time, but it's also important to know how much you've lost, how much has walked out the door. So we can use inventory adjustment reason codes to help with that in RQ4. Are you taking advantage of the general ledger reporting available? If you're not alone. Only 5% of our clients have GL accounts linked to at least one adjustment reason code. So, show of hands, how many people in this room are using that feature? Who has a GL account mapped to an inventory adjustment reason code? Quite a few, awesome. You guys are ahead of the game. So I think that the statistic is so low just because many people don't know about this feature. It's, again, a fairly new feature, and still a lot of people don't know it's there yet. So let's look at how we can work with this better. So here's our settings console. We have the inventory adjustment reason code setting under our inventory settings. Here's a closer look at that. So let's talk about why we would use reason codes in the first place. So anytime you adjust inventory, whether that's because of a manual inventory cost or quantity adjustment, maybe it's due to reconciling a purchase order or adjusting your inventory based on an inventory count, you have to choose a reason code to process that transaction or that adjustment. So this is our list of reason codes. When you launch with RQ4, you have a default list set up for you. You can change the wording on those, you can add additional ones, customize those a little bit, but this is what that list looks like, and for every one you can choose a GL account. So here we have the theft expense account mapped to our theft reason code. So a couple examples of this, why this can be important. Of course, in the wireless industry, unfortunately, we have a lot of theft. Oftentimes it's internal, it's our employees. Sometimes we have break-ins, but a lot of phones are walking out the door. And we want to know when that happens, we want to be able to adjust those out and account for that and know that those were stolen. On the other side of that, we have items that we have to write off. So maybe they're damaged, maybe they're just outdated equipment, but we need to write them off. But we want to know that those are different from the ones that are stolen. So if you use this GL account, you have this set up, then this is the account that will get affected in your general ledger when you make those adjustments and choose that reason code. This reporting is available in RQ4, in Business Intelligence, and ultimately in your accounting software if you're exporting and importing that information. So here's a look at an example. We're back in our company detail inquiry in the GL account activity report. In this example, we've adjusted out a piece of equipment valued at $414. with the reason code and GL account set to theft. So what's happened here is we have a debit to our theft expense account and a credit to inventory on hand. So we can easily use our filters again, maybe not look at a specific transaction like we have here, but just look at the date range and filter by that account and see our debit and credit totals for any given expense account on any day. So now for some exciting new features. So I'm really excited to show you some new stuff that's coming out in 4.10. And I think we're running out of time, so I'm going to have to roll through these kind of quickly. So I hide my purchase orders when I export to QuickBooks. Why not my RMAs? So now in 4.10, we have that option. So why would I want to hide my RMAs? So let's talk about the current options. In RQ4 now, and this is specific to if you're using the QuickBooks export, you have the option to hide your purchase orders or hide your transfers, which hides, in the case of purchase orders, hides that transaction entirely, both sides, the debit and the credit, so that you can enter those invoices from your vendor into QuickBooks manually. Then you have the option to export your purchase orders and your RMAs as QuickBooks as bills. Or if you don't choose either of those options, you have a general journal entry with that information, debit to inventory, credit to accounts payable, that's going to your general ledger or ultimately to QuickBooks. So we kind of left out RMAs when we were looking at what to hide. So now you can, again, export your purchase orders and your RMAs, but when you look to hide, you can just hide your purchase orders. So if you're hiding your purchase orders because you want to enter those in QuickBooks, likely you want to hide your RMAs too. So if you're doing that today, this will help you. Let's look at real quickly here how we do that. Here under miscellaneous in our finance section back in the settings console, we have an option there. Here's a blow up of that. Hide RMAs when exporting to QuickBooks. So real simple, just check the box before you run the export. Again, this will hide our debit to accounts payable and our credit to inventory, so the exact opposite of what we're hiding with purchase order receipts. Why can't I separate my vendor receivables into more than one account? So let's think about that for a minute. The vendor receivables meaning your carrier commission, any commission you receive from a vendor. Show of hands, how many have thought, I would like to do this? I would like to have these separate. Yes, several people. So now we can do it in version 4.10. This is, of course, important for clients with multiple carriers or even with multiple vendors. So especially if you're a large client, you may have a significant amount of income coming from partner vendors like handset protection, handset trade-in, bill payment processors. So this is extremely important to help you manage that. Can you benefit from this feature? 74% of our client databases are actively using more than one vendor account. So more than one vendor that you're receiving commission from in some form. Of that 74%, 47% have more than 3. So a lot to manage there. Here we have our settings console. Currently there is one payment type called VinReb Act that collectively gets all of the receivables from vendors, so all the vendor rebate products, it all goes to that payment type, and then that's mapped to one specific receivable, so one AR account. With this feature, you can choose your vendor account here in the vendor account setup. There's just a simple checkbox there. Use custom GL account for VinReb account transactions, and then you choose the account. So real simple, you can have a different account for every vendor account. So vendors that you're receiving inventory from. Okay, so the last feature I'm going to talk about. In the last couple of years, I've talked with many clients about GL setup and finance processes specific to RQ4. This has been by far the #1 requested functionality. So now, thanks to some great work by our development and QA teams, we have it. Anyone want to take a guess what it is?
Multiple bank
Right on. Mapping bank accounts by location. You can clap now. Come on. This is awesome, everybody. So will this functionality help you? 73% of all RQ4 client databases have more than one active location. So if you have more than one location, likely your nightly deposits are going to more than one bank account, especially if you have many spread out in more than one city. So this is going to save you tons of time, or the person in your admin office that's sorting through your bank deposits. Here's our settings screen again. We have our payment set up here, and we're going to look specifically at the payment method setup. Currently, we can map a bank account by payment type. So for all of your cash transactions for every location, one bank account, all of the credit card specific, MasterCard, Visa, etc., each their own bank account, checks, etc. Now we can map each payment type and each location to a specific GL account. So this is huge, especially if you're using one of our exports. You don't have to sort through those deposits when they get into your accounting software anymore. They're going to go directly into the account you want them in based on the location that they're rang up in. So I know we're out of time, but I have one more slide to show you, and this may be the most important one yet. So this is my family. This is my husband, Luke. We've been married for almost 12 years. And my daughter, Cadence. She's 4 years old. She may be one of the youngest Summit attendees ever. She came when she was about 2.5 months old. Back when I was a client, I wasn't going to miss a Summit, so I just brought her along. But the reason, and there really is a reason, I'm showing you them today, I want you to think about something that you love. Maybe it's your family, maybe it's loved ones, maybe it's a hobby, watching sports, like the Cardinal game that I think is coming on later. Yeah. But something that you love to do. Our goal is to provide you with the tools and the processes that you need to run your business more effectively so that you can spend more time doing what you love. So let's talk about that highlighter, that manual reconciling story again. That took a lot of time, and that was the most manual way to do that. And we've come, again, a long way since then. And now we have tons of tools in RQ4 so that we can do the same job much more efficiently, much faster. Ultimately, again, time is money. And we just want to make sure that you're doing things the most effective way so that you can get home to your family or to doing something else you love instead of spending too much time analyzing those numbers and having to do things at your business that can be more automated. So when you go home, pick at least one of these features that you've seen today, implement it, save yourself some time and money.